Here's our annual black locust blossom harvest. We'll actually sometimes cut full-on black locust trees down for this if there's a multifunctional reason to do so. So this is one of the first black locusts we planted, actually. It's about 10 inches DBA, well, 10 inches at the base, splits into two here, busted out, just completely busted open a 2x tree shelter, which I think are 4 inches, years ago, probably in like year 5. This is now in year 10 or so. There's another year 8. I think this one was planted, and then a bunch of others. We've got locusts 40 feet tall from early on plantings, and a lot of them have actually been cut once already. And so we don't always cut them down to get the blossoms. We lay hedges, you know, living fences, and they'll flower low. And some of the younger ones will flower low too, low enough to get, like you see this one here. But if you really want to get a lot, access to a lot, you want a living fence or hedge, or just drop locusts, which just build soil as the roots die back, etc., etc. There's a lot of functional reasons to drop. I'm actually trying to release these black currants right here, give them a little bit of sun, although honestly they almost don't need it. They're thriving, and this was in at least half-day shade, and there's already 10 to 14 inches of growth on these black currants. These are consort variety. For harvesting, we'll just bring a big harvest basket out, and I'll make sure I just cherry pick the best, because there's no way I'm going to harvest a fraction of the blossoms, even on this tree. And I'm a few days late compared to what I like to do. Just been busy with other things. I would like to get them on the up and up, like on the early end, rather than the kind of senescence end of them. But you know, that's kind of where we're at with things right now. And sorry about the weed whacking sound. I do hire a guy every now and then to weed whack, because I have a bit of hay fever, and I can be doing other things. I scythe when possible, but most people I can hire aren't qualified to scythe, that's for sure. So yeah, he's clearing stuff up. So we'll cherry pick the best stuff. And this is actually rolling over in the breeze. You want to get this stuff immediately, right as it's fresh. You know, you don't cut this down and then harvest later in the day. You harvest the blossoms right off. And we'll make mead with this, and we'll have some salads. I mean, we'll have a ridiculous quantity of salads. And you know, this is one tree of hundreds and hundreds that we have here. So this might be, I might get a 1/10 of what's on this tree, probably a lot less than that actually. So you call that a bit of a sustainable yield. I mean, we're harvesting like, let's say, a couple hundredths of what's on the property, you know, not even, probably a lot less than that. And then we'll make a mead with it. They're incredibly good tasting fresh too. But for mead, they're wonderful as garnishes. Just a straight up food. Can't really beat the regenerative nature of this kind of food. And look at how much blossom is on this. You know, and this one was kind of in the shade. It was on the north side of this tree, this branch. So the blossoms are hanging on a little longer, because some of the blossoms are already kind of done for. Although west facing, unusually, counterintuitively, seem to have like the freshest, the furthest behind the blossoms, which is weird, because that's a hot aspect. You'd think they would be advanced, but they're not. You could make a lot of money harvesting these and selling them at farmers markets. Some people are starting to do that, but you got to educate your customer base. If I wanted to go to a farmer's market to make a living and pay my taxes, I would sell these, but I don't. Have easier ways of making a living than that, I think. But if that was my livelihood, I would certainly sell these. And we planted our entire sunny boundary of the property with these. so everything but the southern boundary. And there's just a wall of flowers now this time of year. And they say you can make more honey on an acre of black locust than anything else. This isn't a job I do barefoot. I like to do a lot of things barefoot, but increasingly in the food forest, well, not necessarily increasingly, we're moving away from some thorny species as that need in the ecology and the succession is being phased out. So black locust, we have plenty in zone 1, but we're phasing them out of zone 1. They've done their good work in zone 1, and now we're killing them off, and we're leaving them mostly in zone 2. But I'm still glad to have some in zone 1, so I can just come out and harvest very easily. Our closer in zones being zone 1, most utilized, most accessible areas. Black locust, we joke during our permaculture course that we need a t-shirt to list all the uses, 101 best uses for black locust. It's one of the most rot resistant woods we can grow, yet it's super fast resistant. So it's like as rot resistant as white oak, maybe more, maybe as much as chestnut. Hard to know for sure. There's no good lists around that I've seen. Yet it's as fast growing as a willow or an alder or a poplar, with wood that's way harder and better than those fast growing trees usually have the crappiest wood, basically, almost all the time. That's a rule, because they're just putting on so much carbon, they can't make it very dense. And this is rot resistant not just from a density standpoint, but from a chemical perspective too. They're amazing fodder for grazing animals. Our sheep love them. Loved, we don't have sheep anymore, but they absolutely love them. They preferred them over clover and comfrey. I mean, up there with clover and comfrey as a food source. They're apparently very high in protein. Not surprisingly, they're a legume leaf, so of course they're good. People like to say how they're poisonous. You know, trees this successful that do well in abused and abandoned places, people love to hate on, call them invasive. Of course, these are very land healing plants. That's what they're doing in the ecology, is trying to mop up after our mess. That's actually most black locusts that are bought, by the way, are for mine reclamation. In Appalachia, they buy millions of black locusts a year because they can plant them on mining sites, and they'll just begin to regenerate those terribly abused areas. So they're an incredible ally. They're a nitrogen fixing plant. Fast growing yet super hardwood, edible, amazing bee, top of the line bee forage plant, tool handle wood, very strong wood. As you can imagine, from a fuel wood perspective, they're completely epic because they're so dense. Whoa, they're up there with hickory. Oh, not quite as high as osage, but you know, up there. White, all the oaks, all the hardest oaks, they're just as good as, and yet they grow as fast as a poplar. I mean, it's just, they're a carbon machine as far as putting carbon back in the ground from the atmosphere where we want the carbon to be. There's no tree that I know of in the temperate regions that can do it as fast as black locust. So I like to say they're our quickest, our fastest carbon pathway, reverse, carbon negative option to us. They're just incredibly efficient at taking atmospheric carbon and putting it into, lignin and cellulose. And you will get cut and get thorned by these when working with them. It's just part of the process. They're not like a hawthorn. They're not gonna like spike you crazy, but they can go through crocks, that's for sure. Anything can go through crocks. But you'll bleed and everything working with these eventually when you have them, but it's worth it. You're not gonna get that hurt. Again, they're not as gnarly as a hawthorn, which can really do some damage. Those are just so long. So that's probably enough. So good.